A portion of this video is sponsored by CuriosityStream. More from them later.
We love chocolate. Frankly, we're obsessed. Globally, we eat almost 8 million metric tons of chocolate every year. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. What is it about this food that wins our hearts? Today, we talk about the science of chocolate. Where did you get your last chocolate bar? From the grocery store? And where did they get it? It's only natural to be curious about where our food comes from. Just a couple of generations ago, most of us lived on farms, and we were connected in a very real way to the land and what we could grow. Now, most of us buy our food in supermarkets, and some people even eat out for every meal. Our modern lifestyle makes it easy to be disconnected from our food. We're trying to get better.
Before we get into learning more about chocolate, we'd like to talk about the sponsor of this portion of the video, CuriosityStream.
As part of our self-education, we recently watched the excellent documentary, The History of Food, on CuriosityStream. We learned so much that we wanted to share with you. We partner with CuriosityStream to bring you this episode. CuriosityStream is a subscription streaming service that offers thousands of documentaries and non-fiction titles from some of the world's best filmmakers, including exclusive originals. Get unlimited access starting at just $2.99 a month. And for our audience, the first 30 days are completely free if you sign up at curiositystream.com/Socratica and use the promo code Socratica, all one word, lowercase, no quotes, during the sign-up process.
Thanks again to CuriosityStream for sponsoring this portion of the video. Now, back to learning about chocolate.
Now let's follow our curiosity. Where did this magical food come from? The cacao tree is a tropical plant native to the Amazon rainforest. Who started farming it? We don't know for sure. It's still a research question. Where and when was cacao first domesticated? Was it the Olmecs, the Mayans? Anthropological research into linguistics show that it could date back to the ancient Olmec civilization, as far back as 1000 BC. We also have archaeological evidence dating in a range from 1800 BC to 1000 BC. Residue of cacao found in ceramic bowls in Mexico, Honduras, Ecuador. Now, keep in mind, the ancient native people of the Americas weren't eating chocolate bonbons. Cacao was first used for the pulpy fruit. It's delicious and can also be fermented. But at some point, maybe when they ran out of the alcoholic beverage, someone tried eating the seeds and they liked it. Cacao seeds were believed to be gifts from the gods. The beans were considered so valuable that they were used as currency by the Aztecs. Both the Mayans and the Aztecs believed cacao had magical properties. It was consumed in celebrations and rituals. In the 1500s, Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés overthrew the Aztec Empire. Cacao was about to be introduced to the rest of the world. There were tales of a frothy cacao beverage that was the only thing the Emperor Montezuma II would drink.
This would have been the criollo variety of cacao.
Hi, Kim. Kim is our resident scientist at Socratica.
I have just a few words about the genetics of cacao, or Theobroma cacao, which is its scientific name. Criollo is the original native form of cacao, and it's considered quite the delicacy today. Only 1% of cacao produced in the world is criollo. It's fragrant, delicate, acidic, aromatic, and hardly bitter at all.
Kim, are you wearing the same shirt as me?
Yes, I thought it was appropriate. You see, it spells chocolate. And we're talking about chocolate.
You said criollo is a variety, so cacao comes in different types?
Yes, there are two other main types of cacao. Forastero, which is a hardy plant that's more resistant to disease, and Trinitario, which is a hybrid of Forastero and Criollo. Forastero makes up 80% of the world's cacao, mainly grown in Africa. It's very bitter and really needs a little sugar to be palatable at all. Trinitario is somewhere in the middle in terms of bitterness, which is not too surprising for a hybrid. It's grown in Trinidad. There are actually all kinds of varieties within these three main strains of cacao. Think of it like grapes in a vineyard or different kinds of coffee beans. Cacao can only grow within a narrow range, 20 degrees in either direction of the equator, and it has to have just the right conditions like temperature, humidity. We're trying to learn more about the best ways to grow different strains of cacao because its future habitat is somewhat precarious. The genome of Theobroma cacao has recently been sequenced, and that should shed some light on various genes that improve plant health and deliciousness.
Well, thanks for that pop-in with the science details, Kim.
I'll be right here if you need me.
Now, let's talk to some people with hands-on experience with chocolate. We're here visiting our friends at El Buen Cacao in Idyllwild, California, to learn more about this beautiful food. El Buen Cacao is a small family business, and they're granting us backstage access to their chocolate factory. This is one of the few bean-to-bar chocolate kitchens. These expert chocolatiers are passionate about their quality and want to encourage people to understand where their food comes from. Eric, thank you for having us. I feel like I won the golden ticket or something. I've never been in a chocolate factory before. Okay, so do you make all your chocolate on site?
We do. Yeah, everything from truffles to chocolate bars.
Oh, do you chocolate all day?
Every day.
So where does your cacao come from?
Currently, all our cacao in the case is from Dominican Republic. We just got a new batch of beans in, 6 different varietals. One from Belize, one from Mexico, one from Brazil, one from Madagascar, one from Honduras.
Ooh, that sounds globally delicious.
This is what a cacao pod looks like.
Wow.
Typically vary in size and color. This is a replica made out of wood. These here are dried cacao pods.
Oh, can you use them as musical instruments?
Yes, exactly.
And what part of it do you use to make the chocolate?
So when you pop the pod open, there's anywhere from 30 to 40 seeds immersed in a white pulp. Use the seeds. They ferment them in that white pulp for anywhere from 3 to 7 days.
So how's the harvesting process of cacao like? Do they use big machines? Like, how does it work?
No, they use machetes, their hands, large pulls. So they cut them off the tree manually, take them off, and then they have to crack open the pod, scoop all the innards out, and let them ferment.
Wow, so it's all done by hand.
All done by hand. No machinery at all in that process.
Wow, that's a lot of work. And what does bean to bar mean?
So bean to bar means that we make chocolate from the bean to the final end product, which would be the chocolate bar, or some people say bonbon, bean to bonbon. We do it all. So we roast, husk the shell off the bean, and then take the cocoa nib or cacao nib and grind it into liquid chocolate or chocolate liqueur. Yeah, so we do everything. We don't take industrial chocolate and melt it down. We do the whole process ourselves. So we are a bean-to-bar craft chocolate maker.
So you mentioned chocolate liqueur. So what are the ingredients to make chocolate?
For us, it's bean-to-bar. So organic cocoa beans, organic cane sugar, and occasionally, I don't do it often, we add organic cocoa butter to make it a little more creamy.
So wait, the cocoa butter, is that the same stuff that we use for moisturizers?
Definitely. It's a little different process if you're using it for food. For us, it's, non-deodorized.
Oh.
So I'm thinking that what they use for cosmetics might be deodorized. And even some chocolate makers, if they don't want to taint a particular bean, we don't do that. If it's going to have chocolate taste to it, it's cocoa butter.
Cocoa butter is a special kind of fat. Here you can see its structure. Fats, or triglycerides, are made of a central core of glycerol with 3 fatty acid chains branching off. Here is oleic acid. It's an unsaturated fatty acid. The other 2, palmitic acid and stearic acid, are saturated. Saturated, unsaturated refers to how saturated with hydrogen are these fatty acids. See this double bond in oleic acid? That means fewer hydrogens can attach, so it's not fully saturated with hydrogens. This is relevant when we think about how fats pack together. More on that in a moment.
And what's the difference between dark chocolate, milk chocolate, and white chocolate? You guys here do dark chocolate, right?
Yes.
Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, because it's pure. It's the best chocolate.
Agreed.
At least in my opinion. So dark chocolate, for us, dark chocolate is anything above 55%.
55% of what?
Cocoa solids.
Okay.
The FDA says cocoa butter could be added in there. We like to do just the cocoa solids. Anything with milk for us is milk chocolate. Even if it's 65% with added milk, to me it's a milk chocolate. And white chocolate would be cocoa butter, milk powder, and something else added, sugar, of course, and maybe vanilla or cocoa nibs. We are a dark chocolate shop, but occasionally we do white chocolate, which is, we call it an earth white because the color of the bar is kind of beige.
Oh.
It's beige because of the coconut sugar and because the cocoa butter is not deodorized.
Okay.
So it is pure cocoa butter, and you can still taste chocolate in it.
Which is rare for white chocolate.
No wax in our chocolate.
Yes. So you mentioned milk powder. Why wouldn't it be like liquid milk, like normal milk? Why is it powder?
You can't add liquid to chocolate. It will seize. And you won't be able to make a usable bar. So everything in chocolate that we add is powdered. It'd be easy to just add milk, but no, you have to use the milk powder. So for us, coconut milk powder or any type of nut-based milk powder that we can find, no actual cow's milk. Nothing against it, but it makes it easier for us because we do deal with a lot of vegans and people allergic to dairy or don't want to use dairy.
Is it true that chocolate was sweetened when it got to Europe?
Originally, chocolate was a bitter chili drink. It didn't always have chili, but there were a lot of uses where chili was involved. It was served hot, cold, basically roasted. Shell were taken off and it was ground on a metate with a mano until it became kind of a paste. They would add a little water, sometimes chili, depending on the ingredients were very interesting. There were quite a few sometimes. Grind it, make a little tablet out of it, and they could take it to travel. Then they'd pour it in water from one cup to another, usually at standing, so the vessel would be on the ground, poured into that vessel back and forth till they got a heavy froth. But it was not a sweet drink. I think the Spaniards had said it wasn't even good enough for their horses when they originally tried it until they realized how healthy it was. And then they started drinking it. It got to Europe. They added sugar, milk.
I read that chocolate was kept a secret by the Spanish for a whole century, only consumed by the Spanish elite. Only later in the 1600s, it began spreading throughout Europe. But for a long time, it was a luxury item.
Time for a chocolate chemistry timeline. Chocolate really took off in 1828 when Dutch chemist Conrad Johannes van Houten figured out how to mix cacao beans with alkaline salts to make cocoa powder. This method is known as Dutch processing. Then in 1847, Joseph Fry added cocoa butter to make a moldable chocolate paste, and the first chocolate bar was born. 1876 marked an important collaboration between Daniel Peter and Henri Nestlé. Yes, that Nestlé, who had a creamery next door. Together, they made the first commercial milk chocolate recipe. In 1879, Rodolphe Lindt added a technique to chocolate making called conching, which mixes and agitates the cocoa butter particles in the chocolate, resulting in a smoother texture. And that's how we got the chocolate we know and love today.
So I think we're ready to start our deep dive into the chocolate making techniques. So I hear you have to temper chocolate, right? What does that entail?
So you basically have to heat the chocolate up to melt all the chocolate molecules and then cool it off until it's in temper. Until they solidify and you have a bar that snaps, shiny, beautiful. You could temper by hand or you can use a machine. We use machines because we make a lot of chocolate and it'd be ridiculous to do it all by hand. And it's much more difficult. It's very temperamental.
Now we get to the real, sophisticated chemistry behind making chocolate. I'm going to show you a strange phase diagram for cocoa butter. It's strange because there are 6 solid phases to it. Normally when you think of a phase diagram, you think solid, liquid, gas, like how water goes from ice to liquid water to water vapor. But for cocoa butter, it's solid 1, solid 2, solid 3, solid 4, solid 5, solid 6, liquid gas. At each of these solid phases, the cocoa butter molecules pack together a little differently. This has to do with how saturated and unsaturated fatty acids behave at different temperatures, how floppy they are. Only one of these solid phases, we call them polymorphs, is really nice to eat. It's phase 5. So the whole point of tempering chocolate is to get rid of all these lower forms of crystals and get as pure of a sample of phase 5 crystals as possible. To temper chocolate, you raise the temperature high enough to melt the chocolate, and then you let it cool down so crystals form, and then you heat it back up just high enough so phase 5 stays crystallized, but the lower phases melt away. This can be repeated a few times if you want to increase your purity. It's just like any kind of crystallization you would do in the lab. It's just a lot tastier. In a chemistry lab, we might start the crystallization process by adding some crystals of the correct type, and this encourages the rest of the mix to snap to that conformation. We call this seeding, and some chocolate makers use this technique.
And how did you learn the whole chocolate making process?
So my wife and I started making chocolate on our own at home. We were working as contract archaeologists out in the desert. Not quite what I went to school for. However, that's what I ended up doing. And I had free time. On my free time, I would make chocolate. But it was all small scale. I had a coffee roaster at home, a small grinder, and I tempered originally by hand and eventually a tiny tempering machine.
And how can you tell if it's high quality chocolate?
There's a few different factors. One, quality of the bean, fermentation, the process, roasting, grinding, tempering. Tempering is a big part of the chocolate. You could have a great bean, roast it well, temper poorly, and the chocolate is not that great.
And what about the percentage of the chocolate? Is there a certain percentage that it's not chocolate anymore? Or
for me, the higher the percentage, the better. But there are a lot of 70 to 100%. That's still not great chocolate. It's the way you prepare the chocolate and what you add to the chocolate. So just basically read the ingredients. There's a lot of chocolate companies that add a lot of garbage to their chocolate.
So when we buy freshly made chocolate, like the chocolate you guys make, how quickly should we eat it? And how do we know when it's gotten old?
That's a tricky question. The shelf life on dark chocolate is anywhere from 18 months to 2 years.
Wow.
If kept in good condition. You would know it's in good condition if it's not bloomed.
That white bloom is a sign that your chocolate has started transitioning from phase 5 to phase 6. That's cocoa butter rising to the surface, gradually taking on another packing conformation. Phase 6 chocolate is still edible, it's just not as nice. It loses its snap, it gets kind of bendy. Sometimes it's even a little gritty in texture from sugar crystals separating out.
So lately people have been talking a lot about how chocolate is good for you. So is it really? And what are the benefits of eating chocolate?
Definitely. And it depends on how much you eat. And even though dark chocolate is really strong, it's a lot of cacao solids, there's still a lot of sugar. I mean, 20% of an 80% bar is sugar. So just moderation.
The major active ingredient is theobromine, which is a stimulant, sort of like a milder caffeine. Notice the similarities in structure. Theobromine works by blocking adenosine receptors in the brain and reduces sleepiness. The darker the chocolate, the higher the concentration of theobromine. This is also the ingredient that makes chocolate toxic for dogs. I mean, theobromine would be toxic for us too if we ate enough of it, but you'd be looking at eating kilograms of chocolate. For dogs, the lethal dose is much smaller.
Do you do a bigger business around Valentine's Day?
We definitely do well during Valentine's Day. It's like Cupid shooting arrows at people. It's shooting chocolate.
Chocolate has this reputation as an aphrodisiac. I don't think that holds up in any studies. I think people got that idea because theobromine is not just a stimulator, but also a vasodilator, so you get a little more blood pumping. Maybe if that's an issue for you, you might find chocolate helpful, but I think there are much better drugs out there if that's what you're looking for.
How does this one food seem to have all these different properties? It's a stimulant, it's a relaxant, it makes you happy.
Now, keep in mind, we've just been talking about one active molecule in chocolate, theobromine. There are hundreds of different chemical compounds in chocolate that contribute to the experience when you eat it, not just for the taste and aroma, but also some of these may have physiological effects. For instance, there's phenylethylamine, PEA, another stimulant that may increase dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter that produces feelings of wellness. Except the PEA in chocolate is most likely broken down when you eat it. There's tryptophan, which is required to make serotonin, another neurotransmitter that affects mood, various phytonutrients, which act like antioxidants in the body. Antioxidants generally help ward off disease and decay in our bodies. There are enough naturally occurring compounds in chocolate to keep researchers busy for decades.
This is why you shouldn't really bother using chocolate substitutes.
Exactly. We're nowhere close to fully understanding this complicated food.
And how do you suggest people eat 100% chocolate?
Oh, so I like to break a small piece off, put it in my mouth, let it melt on the roof of my mouth, and then swish it back and forth. Taste the different flavors, nuances that the particular cocoa bean has, and yeah, and enjoy the chocolate.
Okay, I can't stand it anymore. I want to see the chocolate. Eric, will you lead the way?
Definitely. All right, welcome. So these are some of our cacao beans. These ones are the Katonga. Katongo. Thank you. If you can see, they're really pristine cocoa beans. Bring them over here into our trusty chocolate roaster. The chocolate roaster is a drum convection oven roaster. So very similar to roasting coffee beans, except for much lower temperature. My roasts tend to be anywhere from 16 to 20 minutes long. I then cool them, cool for anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. Take them out, put them in our winnower over here, which is the process. The beans fall through the hopper, go through this kind of put together juicer here, cracks the shell off. The nibs fall down through these tubes. The vacuum on the other end sucks the husks into the box, and the heavier nibs fall into a bucket. Sort through them because it doesn't do a perfect job unless you rerun the product through there. I take those nibs, which actually I have some here. These are some cocoa nibs. This is what we make chocolate out of, minus the husk. We then take this cacao nib, bring it to a machine like I have over here. You set it on there.
I'm just trying to get the
Can you see? Mm-hmm. So this is our 65% chocolate. Thank you. Thank you. That's good. Huh? Mm-hmm. These are kind of taken apart small tempering machines I use for much smaller batches. I do 40 bars or so. When I say taken apart, it's just because of cleaning. I take them apart and they're back in the kitchen. I'll bring them back out here when I'm ready to use them. But it does the same thing. It melts the chocolate to about 108 degrees. Then I add seed chocolate, cools it down, the molecules solidify, and voila, we have tempered chocolate. It's a process, not nearly, not an easy one all the time, but it's a process. So those are smaller tempering machines. This here is more of a large scale tempering machine. It's a 55-pound continuous tempering machine. That means that I do not have to add seed chocolate, and it continuously tempers the chocolate. Here and there, it turns and turns, keeping the chocolate moving all the time. It goes down through a drain, through an auger. I think they call it an Archimedes screw. Comes out the top, cools it, and right now it's in temper at 31.5 degrees Celsius. I am ready. Take some of the air bubbles out, I can scrape it. Oh, this is a good scraper. First time I used this scraper, so. It said like hours versus days. And so, I wouldn't be
Oh, they pop right out.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So now when you move in and get a close-up.
We're so glad that we could learn more about the science of chocolate, where it comes from, how it's made, and a little bit about its future. Speaking of the future of chocolate, it's time for me to leave. But I'm taking the chocolate with me. I'll have this row, and this row, and that row, and 2 of those. I want all of them. They're all mine. All mine. Thank you to our friends at Buen Cacao for hosting us.